Hello and welcome back to Aetheral Space. It's me, Tanhony. You remember, right?
And it's me, Dragon Hadrian.
You
I
are
can't
not
hack.
Dragon Hadrian.
I could be.
That is not Solid Snake.
We're back with some more Aetheral Spacey goodness. What happened last time? Well, watch the last episode, dummy.
Yeah, dummy. Yeah, you fuckwit. I'm sorry.
Damn.
I'm sorry.
Where did that come from?
I just hate my viewers so much.
The repressed rage.
It's not repressed,
All right,
I just let it out.
Let's get this show on the road. Skipper didn't much like people who looked down on others, even more so when the jerks could fly, making things awfully literal. Still, there was one good thing about that kind of attitude. It came with a simple solution. Just knock him down. It was nice to have such an easy victory condition. Blue sky shone above him. Green clouds swirled beneath him. As Skipper launched himself towards the enemy above him, he thrust one hand out, ready to fire off an attack the second he came into range. Even if the enemy survived this assault, he'd be occupying its attention enough to give everyone below some breathing room.
"Hey, buddy,"
Skipper called out.
"couldn't help but notice you were stuck all the way up here. I'll help you down, yeah?"
The enemy, Acamanto, didn't reply, only glaring down at him balefully with its pale blue eyes. Almost imperceptibly, one of its arms retreated inside its red and blue cloak. An attack would be incoming then. Acamanto vanished in a spark of red and blue aether. He hadn't retreated. Skipper wasn't nearly naive enough to believe that. From what he'd been told, it had pursued Ruth and Dragon halfway through the capital city before finally surrendering. It would be nice to imagine, but Skipper wasn't nearly intimidating enough to make something like that turn tail just by showing up. There was a whistling in the wind, projectiles approaching from behind him. Skipper twisted his body around in the air to face the threat. 3 throwing knives aimed perfectly for his eyes, throat, and heart.
"Heartbeat landmine!"
A burst of sound erupted from within his very core, and for a moment it felt as if his entire body would be flung apart from the force. The throwing knives aimed for him were thrown off course by the base, zooming off into the distance ahead.
"Sorry, pal!"
Skipper shouted to the still empty air.
"I'm not that easy to take out!"
Skipper kept his hands facing down towards the ground as he looked around for his enemy, releasing a constant stream of heartbeat shotguns to keep himself aloft. Maybe he should develop a technique to do this sort of thing automatically. A heartbeat jetpack or something like that. No, it didn't fit with the theme. A heartbeat rocket jump? Another whistle, this time from above, but again aimed for his head. Skipper was getting a good sense of their speed and power now, so he could afford to be a little more precise.
"Heartbeat bayonet!"
The invisible blade struck through the air twice, deflecting the 2 throwing knives with tings of metal. The blades fell uselessly out of the air, one plummeting to the ground below, the other caught between 2 of Skipper's metal fingers. Keeping himself up with shotguns from the soles of his feet, Skipper turned the blade over in his hands. One side red, one side blue, with an unusual design like that of an arrowhead. I actually had a question.
Yeah.
How does aether flow through the body? Like, for example, if someone had a blood clot in their leg, or like the nerve started to get cut off, could they not transfer aether down to their foot?
They could. You could, strengthen the foot, but if there's an issue of, the nerve where you can't control your foot, that would remain. It's just the physical properties of it.
So you don't need, nerves to transfer aether. It's just, any part of the body can conduct it. Okay. Keeping himself up with shotguns from the soles of his feet, Skipper turned the blade over in his hands. One side red, one side blue, with an unusual design like that of an arrowhead. It had been infused with aether, sure, but it was without a doubt a physical object.
"Recorded, huh?"
He called out, carefully listening out for the next attack.
"Pretty good work with it, too. You're fast enough to hide by the time the blade actually hits me. Well, would hit me, if you had better aim."
He chuckled.
Sorry. I'm sort of a sore winner, yeah?"
His ears pricked up at the sound of crackling aether behind him, and when he whirled around, there was his enemy. Acamanto floated there in the air, a few meters away, cloak spread out around itself like the wings of a great bat. Red and blue aether coiled freely around it, and the eyes behind the mask narrowed as they regarded Skipper.
"That's a surprise,"
Skipper grinned, idly passing the knife between his hands.
"You were doing so well with the coward strategy. You sure you want to ditch it, pal?"
Acamanto tilted its head slightly.
"2 paths lie before you,"
it declared.
"a path of blue and a path of..."
With a flare of green aether, Skipper hurled the knife at his enemy, the projectile moving with such speed and power that it looked more like a green lance of light than an actual physical object. Acamanto, too, moved in a flash, moving its head out the way of the attack and catching the projectile firmly in its hand. Steam rose up from the guardian entity's gloved hand as it retrieved the knife, returning it to the inside of its cloak. Is this like the world's most intense game of Pong?
Impressive,
Skipper grinned.
You used Aether yourself to block that, didn't ya? Don't try and lie. I know the good stuff when I say it.
So even though this is like a recorded Aether being, it too can use Aether?
It seems so.
2 paths lie before you.
Skipper wagged a middle finger.
Don't try and change the subject, buddy. You're a little different from your barnyard friends, yeah? You're not just recording using Aether. You're using the stuff yourself. That kinda makes me curious. What's the deal, big fella?
A path of blue and a path of red.
Skipper sighed.
Okay, I can see we're getting nowhere with the old diplomacy tactic. That's a damn shame. Looks like we're gonna have to do this the hard way.
To take the path of our big shotgun!
The invisible projectile struck Akamanto right in the chest, sending it flying backwards as red and blue Aether sparked around it, an indistinct cry of pain echoing from behind the entity's mask. Just before the creature would have slowed to a stop, however, it vanished, just as it had before executing its previous attack.
No point, pal!
Skipper laughed, carefully turning on the spot so as not to lose the equilibrium that was keeping him stable up here in the air.
Dragon's already told me about your little altercation back in Corin. I know you're not some kind of robot, so there's no point pretending. Let's talk, man to man. Or, entity to man, I guess. What do you say?
There was a growl from below. A genuine expression of rage.
I have nothing to say to you, crownless.
Skipper's grin widened. Finally, they were getting somewhere. Could you remind me of what crownless was mentioned
That's
before?
like, one of the people created by the Gene Tyrants who are just like a normal, regular human. Rather than cogitant or repugnant or anything.
So maybe this guy's related to the Gene Tyrants in some way, like a Gene Tyrant servant or guard. Very interesting. Shall I pass it to you temporarily?
It's up to you.
Yeah, because the Akamanto takes a lot out of me.
Okay. Dragon blinked as he watched that idiot zoom through the air above. Well, that solved one problem. He turned to Lily, doing his best to ignore the smouldering flames still visible in the distance, shining through the fog even as they faded. They weren't out of the woods yet, but the fact that Akamanto was occupied meant they didn't have to worry about any more bombs dropping on their heads. It also meant Dragon didn't have to worry as much about attracting the wrong sort of attention. You might want to cover your ears, he said. And the next moment he took a deep breath of air, infusing his lungs with Aether to maximise their capacity as much as possible. Lily's hands went to her ears, and Dragon did the same. He didn't want to blow out his own eardrums with his own heroic cry, after all. He opened his mouth.
I would remove the first own, blow out his eardrums with his own hero cry. That way, it's not own.
Yeah, sure. He opened his mouth. Get over here. No. Get over here!
I was drinking a cup of water. I almost spit it all over my keyboard. Get over here!
Old Owl's gaze didn't break away from Ruth, staring her down with all the intensity of a star. He hadn't blinked in at least 5 minutes. Ruth vaguely wondered if the old man even had to. The grin he had described the spot they'd been waiting on as a hill, but that seemed to be something of an understatement.
Could you re-say that word again? Because I kept messing that up when I was on my own.
Grinhy.
The Grinhy. Okay.
Yeah. It rose out of the ground,
I thought it was
sure,
Grinhay.
but such a height that it pierced through the clouds of pungent gas that permeated the swamp, allowing a view of the blue sky above. It wasn't quite a mountain, but it wasn't some lump in the ground either. They weren't exposed. The tree is lucky enough to have been born on this patch of safe land to take full advantage of the opportunity, growing thick and wide. The layers upon layers of branches were almost like a giant umbrella, shielding them from both the sun and scrutiny. She'd barely managed to restrain herself when she'd heard the first explosion, but some tiny quiet power of Ruth had managed to keep her from charging in then and there.
Sorry to pause you, but I just quick appreciation. Shielding from both the sun and scrutiny is a cool line. I really like that.
What exactly could she do by herself anyway? The one attacking the rebels was that dot far above. Akamanto, no doubt, who Ruth had no means to reach. If she ran in now, the only opponent she'd be facing would be a searing fireball. So she stood there, hands balled into fists, and listened to the sounds. The sounds of gas bursting into flames, the sound of people screaming as they burnt, the sounds of powerlessness. A strange cracking noise came from Old Owl's mouth as he opened it, preceding his speech. You must understand this is the best way to do a thing. Patience and the cold are victory's parents. You must understand this. The worst thing was that she could. She could see the value of this plan. Once this bombing was over, the regulators would have no choice but to enter the swamp themselves to confirm casualties. Then the Grinhy could begin their bombing attack. But this was their fight. She couldn't forget this was their fight, not hers. What she wanted was to make sure her friends were safe. You must not expose us, Old Owl said cautiously, as if he could see the thoughts battling inside Ruth's brain. This is the ideal way. Her gaze drifted up. The dot in the sky, the guardian entity that caused him so much trouble, was no longer alone. The red and blue speck was bobbing and weaving, vanishing and reappearing as a new green dot pursued it. Even from such a distance, Ruth could recognise it. Skipper. He was alive. A long-lost smile came to her face. What the hell was she doing? Just going with the flow like this as she'd always done, letting other people tell her what the best thing to do was while she ignored her own instincts, her own desires. A familiar voice sounded out from the swamp below, trees swaying from the force of it. Get over here! And then can I pass it back to you?
Yeah. Dragon too. They'd made it back safe! She'd succeeded after all! She hadn't lost what she had yet.
You must ignore for this time, Old Owl advised. Harden your heart for victory.
She looked at Old Owl, looked at the gathering Grinhy, looked at the battle below. None of this meant anything to her. Ruth could have laughed. When she thought about it like that, it was all so simple. Freedom, liberty, revolution? Those things were for other people to worry about. They didn't mean a damn thing to her. She didn't care how liberating it was to just not care. What she cared about were the people closest to her, nothing else. Saving them was the only victory she cared about. She glanced up. She wouldn't lose what she had. Old Owl's eye narrowed. He at least seemed to recognize the conclusion she'd come to.
Do not be a foolish person, girl, he warned. If you are an obstacle to victory, you are an enemy. There is no need for us to be enemies.
Ruth ignored him. There was nothing he could do to stop her anyway. There was no way anyone here could stop her. She was strong, after all. Ruth kicked off the ground with a flare of red aether, skeletal set manifesting around her as she flew through the air, wind whipping against her grinning face in the moment before her mask appeared. Her claws, too, shone into life, long and thin as needles, reflecting the sunlight as she spread them wide. There was shouting from the Grinhy behind her, but Ruth paid it no mind. After all, there was work to be done. If she wanted to keep hold of what she had, the rebels had to win this battle. For the rebels to win this battle, they needed reinforcements. And for the rebels to get reinforcements, she'd need to drag the Grinhy into this earlier than they would have liked. Her jump still sending her over the pungent clouds of the swamp, Ruth grinded her claws together, and the resultant sparks rained down below.
Boom!
Each one of them, every individual spark, triggered an explosion, an inferno whirling around the hill that the Grinhy had based themselves upon. They themselves were untouched, of course, but anyone taking a look at what that explosion had been would see what was clearly a third army lying in wait, a beacon for all to see. Ruth fell through the fire just as it died down, whooping in relieved excitement as the fading flames licked threateningly against her armor. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. She knew what she wanted now, and she knew how to get it. I guess I must have thought you were a good person, Robin had said. Sorry, Robin, Ruth grinned, landing on the ground, but I think I might actually be a bit of an asshole. It felt good. And that is the end of this chapter. I think the Akamanto scarred my throat in a way I couldn't really do Old Owl at the end there.
Took the,
but
the puff of reds. Your throat was destroyed.
It was worth it, though. I feel like that was a really bombastic chapter. A lot of action, a lot of development very quickly. I'm very, I already want to, go, next chapter. Good stuff. Anything you want to say before we close this one off, Dan?
Not really. I'm just, I agree with you there. It was very bombastic. I liked it. I wrote it. I enjoyed writing it as well.
I did a real good job writing that, didn't I?
This guy's a genius.
There are two paths before you. The path of red, which is to go on Royal Road and leave a review, or the path of blue, which is to link this video to a friend and tell them to go on Royal Road and leave a review. Choose wisely.
You fucking better.
Alright, guys. See you next time. Bye!
Bye!